I am Jessica, 34 years old, and work as a school counselor at Westlake Middle School. When Sabrina walked into my office that Monday morning with red eyes, I knew something was terribly wrong. The iPad she had saved 6 months for had been sold by her mother as punishment for a B+. What I witnessed next was more than just an argument over property rights. It was the shattering of trust. Before I share this story, let me know where you are watching from and hit subscribe to follow more real stories about the impacts of parenting decisions on children. I have been a school counselor for 8 years now, spending each day navigating the complex emotions and challenges that come with adolescence. Westlake Middle School sits in a quiet suburban neighborhood with neatly trimmed lawns and two-car garages, the kind of place where people move for the good schools and safe streets. The first time I met Sabrina Anderson was during routine new student introductions last fall. At 13, she had a quiet confidence that stood out among the usual awkward energy of middle schoolers. Her dark brown hair was often pulled back in a practical ponytail, and behind her glasses her eyes lit up whenever she talked about art. "I want to design things someday," she told me during that first meeting. "Logos, websites, maybe even video games." There was something immediately likable about Sabrina. Unlike many students who fidgeted uncomfortably in my office, she made direct eye contact and spoke with clarity about her interests. Still, I noticed how she would sometimes glance down when speaking about home, a subtle shift I had learned to recognize over the years. Our school has a check-in program for new students, so I saw Sabrina weekly for the first month. During our third session, she brought her iPad to show me some of her digital artwork. "This is really impressive," I said, genuinely amazed by the detailed landscape she had created. "How long have you been drawing digitally?" "Just a few months," she replied with a hint of pride. "I saved up for this iPad myself. Took me forever." That caught my attention. Most 13-year-olds in our district had their devices purchased by parents. "You bought this yourself?" I asked. Sabrina nodded, her posture straightening slightly. "I worked at my aunt's cafe after school and on weekends. 6 months of washing dishes and taking orders." She swiped through more artwork, explaining her techniques and inspirations. There was a sophisticated understanding of color and composition unusual for someone her age. "My mom wanted me to focus on math and science." She continued, her voice taking on a slightly different tone. "She says art is just a hobby, not a real career path. But I figured if I bought the iPad with my own money, she couldn't really say no." That comment stayed with me after our session. There was something in the careful way Sabrina had phrased it that suggested navigating around restrictions was a common necessity in her home. As the weeks passed, Sabrina would occasionally stop by during lunch periods to show me new pieces she was working on. Her talent was undeniable, and I made a point of encouraging her to consider submitting work to student exhibitions. She was building an impressive digital portfolio that could eventually help with art school applications. "My grades have to stay perfect, though," she mentioned once. "Mom says the minute they slip, the art has to stop." The pressure Sabrina put on herself became increasingly apparent. While most students her age were experimenting with interests and identities, she seemed to be walking a tightrope between her passion and her mother's expectations. One afternoon, I noticed Sabrina sitting alone in the cafeteria, intensely focused on her iPad. "Working through lunch again?" I asked, stopping by her table. She looked up with a start. "I have to finish this commission." "Commission?" I was surprised. "Yeah, my friend's mom wants a logo for her home bakery business," Sabrina explained. "She is paying me $50. At 13, Sabrina had already turned her passion into a small source of income, a remarkable achievement I made sure to acknowledge. But I also gently reminded her about the importance of balance. "Just make sure you are taking breaks too. Growing brains need rest and social time." She nodded but didn't look entirely convinced. There was an intensity to her work ethic that, while admirable, concerned me slightly. It wasn't the typical enthusiasm of someone pursuing a passion, but something more urgent, as though she were constantly proving her worth through productivity. As the semester progressed, Sabrina continued to excel academically while developing her artistic skills. Her teachers reported that she was conscientious and articulate, though sometimes anxious about tests and grades. By all standard metrics, she was thriving. Yet something about her situation continued to nag at me professionally. The subtle signs of pressure, the need to justify her artistic pursuits, the hypervigilance about grades all painted a picture of a child carrying an adult-sized burden of expectations. Still, nothing in our interactions suggested an urgent concern. Many high-achieving students face similar pressures, particularly in communities like ours, where academic success is heavily emphasized. My role was to observe support and intervene only if clear issues emerged. For now, I simply made sure Sabrina knew my office was a safe space where she could speak freely about her challenges and celebrations. Little did I know then how significantly our professional relationship would deepen in the months ahead, or how crucial that established trust would become when Sabrina's carefully balanced world began to unravel. The first parent-teacher conference of the year always reveals dynamics that student interactions alone don't fully capture. When Karen Anderson walked into my office for our scheduled meeting, I immediately sensed the force field of expectations she carried. Karen was impeccably dressed in a tailored business suit, her blonde hair cut in a precise bob that suggested both professional success and careful attention to appearance. She checked her watch as she sat down, making it clear that her time was valuable and limited. "Mrs. Anderson, thank you for coming in today," I began with my standard welcoming tone. I wanted to touch base about Sabrina's adjustment to Westlake and share some observations about her strengths. "I am primarily concerned about her academic standing," Karen replied, cutting directly to what she considered important. "Her previous school had higher testing averages, and I want to ensure she is being adequately challenged here." I nodded professionally while noting the immediate focus on metrics rather than well-being. "Sabrina is performing exceptionally well academically," I assured her. "All her teachers report that she is engaged, thorough with assignments and testing above grade level in most subjects. She has particularly impressive critical thinking skills." Karen nodded, seemingly pleased with this information. "Good. I have made it clear that nothing less than excellence is acceptable. We are aiming for top universities, and these middle school years are foundational." When I mentioned Sabrina's artistic talents, hoping to broaden the conversation to her creative strengths, Karen's expression shifted subtly. "The drawing is fine as a hobby," she said dismissively, "but I have explained to Sabrina that it cannot distract from her core studies. There is limited professional future in art, unless you are exceptionally gifted, which is statistically unlikely." The clinical assessment of her daughter's passion struck me as unusually harsh, but I maintained my professional demeanor. "Sabrina has mentioned she purchased her own iPad for her digital art," I noted. "That shows remarkable dedication and work ethic for someone her age." Karen's lips tightened slightly. "Yes, she insisted on that purchase despite my recommendations to focus on academic software instead. I allowed it since she used her own money, but with the clear understanding that her grades must remain perfect." The way she said "allowed it" caught my attention. There seemed to be an underlying tension about Sabrina exercising independence, even when doing so through legitimate means like earning her own money. As our conversation continued, Karen detailed the household rules and expectations, structured study time each evening, limited recreational screen time, weekly grade reviews, and additional academic enrichment activities during weekends and school breaks. "We have a point system for privileges," she explained. "Extra screen time, friend visits, and other freedoms are earned through academic performance and responsible behavior." While structure and high expectations can be positive parenting tools, something about the comprehensive control Karen described felt excessive. There was little room for Sabrina to develop intrinsic motivation or self-regulation when every aspect of her life appeared to be externally managed through rewards and punishments. "Adolescence is also an important time for developing independence and personal identity," I suggested gently. "Finding the balance between guidance and autonomy can help prepare students for the self-management they will need in college and beyond." Karen smiled thinly. "I appreciate the contemporary theories, Ms. Miller, but I have a successful system. Sabrina will thank me when she has opportunities that her less disciplined peers miss out on." After Karen left, I made additional notes in Sabrina's file. While nothing in our conversation indicated actionable concern, I marked a reminder to pay attention to signs of anxiety or undue pressure in our future interactions. The following week, Sabrina came to my office during her study period, something she had never done before. She seemed hesitant, hovering in the doorway until I invited her in. "Everything okay?" I asked as she settled into the chair across from my desk. "I was wondering if you talked to my mom at the conference," she said carefully. "About my art and stuff." I maintained appropriate professional boundaries while acknowledging her question. "We discussed your overall adjustment to Westlake, including your academic performance and interests. Is there something specific concerning you?" Sabrina sighed, seeming to choose her words carefully. Mom has been extra strict about my iPad time since the conference. She says I need to prove that art is not interfering with my real studies. The way she emphasized real suggested this was her mother's terminology. How do you feel about that distinction? I asked. Sabrina looked down at her hands. It is not fair. I work really hard on everything. I have never gotten below an A-, but nothing ever seems good enough. She told me about the cafe job, filling in details I hadn't known. For 6 months, she had worked 12 hours each weekend plus 2 afternoons a week. No vacations, no exceptions. $800 saved one shift at a time. The iPad had represented not just a tool for art, but a hard-won victory of determination. Mom wanted me to put the money toward a college fund, Sabrina explained. We argued about it for weeks. Eventually, she said I could buy it if I maintained perfect grades and still contributed 20% of my earnings to the college account. The conversation revealed patterns of control extending beyond normal parental guidance. Sabrina described house rules reminiscent of a military academy, structured times for every activity, limited social interactions, frequent inspections of her room and belongings, and privileges that could be revoked for minor infractions. I just wish she would trust me a little, Sabrina said softly. I am not trying to disappoint her. I just want some space to be myself too. I listened carefully, offering validation of her feelings while avoiding undermining her mother's authority. This balancing act is one of the most delicate aspects of school counseling, particularly when students reveal home dynamics that concern us professionally. Have you tried talking with your mom about how her expectations make you feel? I asked. Sabrina's slight laugh held no humor. Feelings are not really something we discuss. Mom says emotions are useful for art, but logic is what gets you ahead in life. Before leaving my office that day, Sabrina showed me her latest digital creation, a strikingly poignant illustration of a bird in a gilded cage. The technical skill was impressive, but it was the emotional resonance of the piece that stayed with me long after our session ended. In the following weeks, I observed Sabrina more closely. She maintained her academic performance, but increasingly showed signs of stress. Dark circles under her eyes, skipped lunches to complete assignments, and a constant checking of her online grade portal. She was operating with the weight of expectations that would crush most adults, let alone a 13-year-old still discovering who she was and what she valued. I consulted with several colleagues about my observations, careful to maintain appropriate confidentiality while seeking perspective. Our school psychologist noted that while the situation warranted monitoring, the threshold for intervention was not yet met. The balance between respecting family values and ensuring student well-being is rarely clear-cut, particularly when dealing with controlling versus abusive behaviors. So I continued to provide Sabrina with a supportive space and gentle guidance on stress management, all while watching for signs that the situation might be escalating beyond her capacity to cope. That vigilance would prove crucial in the difficult weeks ahead. The Monday morning that changed everything started like any other at Westlake. Students streamed through the hallways before first bell lockers slammed, and the familiar controlled chaos of adolescent energy filled the building. I was reviewing my schedule for the day when there was a soft knock at my open door. Sabrina stood there, her face pale and her eyes rimmed with red. The iPad she usually carried was conspicuously absent. "Can I talk to you?" Her voice was barely audible. "Of course," I said, immediately clearing space in my schedule. "Come in." She sat down heavily in the chair across from my desk, her backpack sliding to the floor beside her. For several moments she said nothing, her hands twisting in her lap. "Sabrina, whatever it is, we can work through it together," I assured her gently. When she finally looked up, the raw pain in her expression took me aback. "She sold it," Sabrina said, her voice breaking. "Mom sold my iPad." The statement hung in the air between us as I processed its implications. "Your iPad? The one you purchased with your own money?" Sabrina nodded, tears spilling onto her cheeks. "I got a B+ on my math test last Friday. Not an A, not even an A-. When I brought my test home, Mom went through this whole lecture about standards and consequences. She said she had warned me that my grades needed to stay perfect if I wanted to keep doing art." As Sabrina recounted the events of the weekend, the full picture emerged. The B+ had been on an advanced algebra test that most students in her grade hadn't even attempted. Rather than recognizing the achievement of tackling advanced material, Karen had focused exclusively on the imperfection. "She took my iPad Friday night and said I needed to think about my priorities," Sabrina continued. I thought it was just a temporary thing, that she would give it back after I promised to study harder or something. Sabrina wiped roughly at her tears, her voice strengthening with anger. But then Saturday morning I heard her on the phone talking to someone about meeting up. When I asked what was happening, she said she was selling the iPad because I had broken our agreement. She said maybe losing something I cared about would teach me to take my education more seriously. Did you try to explain that it was your property? I asked carefully. I tried everything, Sabrina said. I reminded her that I bought it with my own money from working all those months. I begged her. I even offered to do extra credit to bring up my math grade. She said that as my parent, she had final say over all possessions in the house regardless of who purchased them. Karen had apparently driven to meet the buyer while Sabrina stayed home, returning with $500, significantly less than Sabrina had originally paid. She put the money in an envelope and told me it was going straight to my college fund as a lesson in priorities. Sabrina finished. She said I could earn screen time privileges back once I brought my grades up, but that art was clearly distracting me from what really mattered. I felt a surge of anger on Sabrina's behalf, but maintained my professional composure. What Karen had done went beyond strict parenting into territory that undermined fundamental lessons about property rights and trust. Regardless of legal technicalities about minors and property ownership, the message sent was devastating. Your work does not matter, your possessions are not truly yours, and your passion is dispensable. I had commissions, Miss Miller, Sabrina added, fresh tears spilling. Real jobs from people who were paying me for designs. I had all my work saved there. 2 years of art, all my progress, everything. And my portfolio for art program applications. It is all just gone. The loss went beyond the physical device. It represented Sabrina's creative expression, her developing professional skills, her sense of accomplishment, and tangible evidence of her hard work and dedication. Had you backed up your work anywhere else? I asked, hoping for some silver lining. She shook her head miserably. Some of it was in cloud storage, but not everything. And now I cannot even access that without the device. As a school counselor, I am trained to maintain objectivity and work within the boundaries of my professional role. But in that moment, I found it challenging to see Karen's actions as anything but harmful, both to Sabrina's emotional well-being and to her developing sense of autonomy and security. How are you feeling right now? I asked, focusing on Sabrina's immediate emotional needs. Like nothing I do matters, she answered with a frankness that broke my heart. Like I will never be good enough no matter how hard I try. And mostly just stupid for thinking that anything could ever really be mine. That last statement particularly concerned me. Adolescents are in the crucial stage of developing their identity and sense of personal agency. When that development is undermined by excessive control, the psychological impact can be significant and lasting. I talked with Sabrina about healthy ways to process her feelings, validate her legitimate sense of injustice, and consider constructive paths forward. Throughout our conversation, I was careful to balance respecting her relationship with her mother while acknowledging the unfairness of what had happened. I know this situation feels overwhelming right now, I told her. But I want you to know that your feelings are valid, your work has value, and your passion for art matters. This setback, while painful, does not define your future possibilities. Before Sabrina left for class, I made sure she understood that my door was always open and that she had a safe space to process her emotions as she navigated the situation at home. I also explained that I would need to follow up on our conversation through appropriate channels as her well-being was my primary concern. After she left, I sat at my desk troubled by what I had heard and uncertain about the most appropriate response. The school has clear protocols for situations involving physical abuse or neglect, but emotional and psychological impacts like this exist in a grayer area. What was clear was that the incident had profoundly shaken Sabrina's sense of security and self-worth, potentially with lasting consequences for her relationship with her mother and her own developing identity. As I noted the details of our conversation in Sabrina's file, I knew that this situation would require careful handling and that more difficult conversations lay ahead for everyone involved. After Sabrina left my office, I immediately consulted our school's intervention protocol. While Karen's actions didn't constitute reportable abuse under state guidelines, the situation raised significant concerns about emotional well-being and parenting approaches that could benefit from professional intervention. My first step was scheduling a meeting with our principal, Dr. Rivera, a veteran educator with 30 years of experience navigating complex family situations. This is a delicate one, she acknowledged after I outlined the situation. Legally, parents have broad discretion over disciplinary approaches and property management in their homes, but ethically, this crosses into concerning territory. We agreed that a meeting with Sabrina's teachers would help establish a fuller picture of her academic performance and recent behaviors before determining next steps. Later that afternoon, our intervention team gathered myself, Dr. Rivera, Sabrina's math teacher, Mr. Patterson, her English teacher, Ms. Washington, and our school psychologist, Dr. Chen. Sabrina is one of my strongest students, Mr. Patterson began. The test she received a B+ on was material 2 grade levels above standard curriculum. Most adults would struggle with these concepts. She has seemed increasingly anxious about grades, Ms. Washington added. Last week she asked if she could redo an essay that received an A-. When I explained that was not necessary, she became teary and insisted she needed a perfect score. Our school psychologist raised concerns about the psychological impact of perfectionistic expectations and the potential long-term effects of Karen's approach. Adolescents need appropriate autonomy to develop healthy self-regulation and identity, Dr. Chen explained. When external control is this pervasive, we often see either rebellion or anxiety disorders emerge, sometimes both simultaneously. By meeting's end, we had developed an action plan. I would schedule a parent conference with Karen with Dr. Rivera present to lend administrative weight to the conversation. Our goal would not be to challenge her parental authority, but to discuss developmentally appropriate expectations and the potential impacts of her disciplinary approaches. 2 days later, Karen Anderson sat stiffly across from us in Dr. Rivera's office, her expression professional but guarded. "Thank you for coming in, Mrs. Anderson," Dr. Rivera began. "We wanted to discuss some observations regarding Sabrina's academic pressure and recent events that have affected her emotional well-being at school." Karen's posture became even more rigid. "I assume this is about the iPad situation. Sabrina mentioned she had spoken to her counselor." I nodded, keeping my tone neutral, and focused on Sabrina's well-being rather than judgment of Karen's actions. "Sabrina was quite distressed," I acknowledged. "Beyond losing the device itself, she lost significant creative work and is struggling with feelings that her efforts and property aren't respected." Karen's response was immediate and defensive. "With all due respect, you are overstepping into parental authority. Disciplinary decisions in my home are not subject to school approval." "We completely respect your authority as a parent," Dr. Rivera assured her. "Our concern is how this situation is affecting Sabrina's emotional well-being and academic performance. When students are under extreme pressure or feeling insecure, their ability to learn is compromised." For the next 45 minutes, the conversation circled through Karen's justifications and our gentle but persistent refocusing on the impacts rather than the action itself. "Sabrina needs to understand that actions have consequences," Karen insisted. The agreement was clear: perfect grades or no distractions. "A B+ on advanced material is exceptional performance," I noted. "We are concerned that perfectionistic expectations may be creating unhealthy anxiety." Karen's expression hardened. "In my house, we believe in reaching full potential. Sabrina is capable of A work. Anything less is settling." When we raised the issue of the iPad being Sabrina's earned property, Karen's position was unwavering. "I am legally responsible for everything in my home and every decision regarding my minor child," she stated firmly. "Everything under my roof is ultimately under my authority. This is a fundamental parenting principle, not a debate." It became increasingly clear that Karen viewed any questioning of her methods as an attack on her parental rights rather than concern for Sabrina's development. "Mrs. Anderson," Dr. Rivera said carefully, "we all want what is best for Sabrina. Sometimes, as parents and educators, we need to balance high expectations with the psychological well-being of the child. And sometimes professionals overstep based on trendy parenting theories," Karen countered. "I was raised with strict standards and it served me well. This generation lacks resilience precisely because everyone is so concerned about their feelings." Despite our best efforts, the meeting ended without meaningful progress. Karen committed to nothing beyond considering the perspective we had shared. As she left, her parting comment revealed the depth of her conviction. "When Sabrina is accepted to an Ivy League school one day, she will understand why I push her. Sometimes good parenting isn't popular in the moment." After Karen left, Dr. Rivera sighed heavily. "That went about as I expected. Keep a close eye on Sabrina, Jessica. Document everything. If this escalates, we may need to consider additional resources." In the days that followed, Sabrina became increasingly withdrawn at school. She completed all assignments with her usual thoroughness, but participated less in class discussions. During lunch, she sat alone in the library rather than with the small group of friends she had previously joined. When she came to my office for our now regular check-ins, she spoke little about home focusing, instead on academic concerns and college preparation questions, as though channeling her mother's priorities. The spark that had animated her discussions of art was noticeably dimmed. "Are you still creating art?" I asked during one session. She shrugged listlessly. "A little, with pencil and paper. It is not the same." I continued to provide a supportive space where Sabrina could express herself honestly while maintaining appropriate professional boundaries and documentation of our interactions. The balance felt increasingly precarious as I watched a bright, creative young person retreat into a shell of anxious perfectionism under the weight of unyielding expectations. What none of us anticipated was how quickly the situation would escalate beyond these already concerning dynamics, or the unexpected ally who would soon enter Sabrina's corner. The call came 3 weeks after our unsuccessful meeting with Karen. I was preparing to leave for the day when my office phone rang. "This is Jessica Miller," I answered. "Ms. Miller, my name is Amanda Foster. I am Sabrina Anderson's Aunt Karen's sister. I wonder if we could speak regarding a situation with Sabrina." The call was unexpected, but not entirely surprising. In my experience, family systems often have counterbalancing forces when one member exhibits controlling behaviors. "I can speak in general terms about school resources," I explained, "but I am limited in what I can discuss about specific students without parental consent." "I understand," Amanda replied. "Karen does not know I am calling, but I am deeply concerned about Sabrina, and frankly, I do not know where else to turn." Amanda explained that Sabrina had called her in tears the previous evening, sharing the iPad situation and other aspects of Karen's controlling behavior. "This is not new," Amanda continued. "Karen has always been exceptionally rigid even as children, but selling something Sabrina purchased herself crosses a line that has me genuinely worried about her emotional well-being." I listened carefully, neither confirming nor denying specific details about Sabrina's situation at school, while gathering potentially valuable context about the family dynamics. Amanda described growing up with Karen, painting a picture of a household where achievement was the primary currency of parental approval. Their father, a successful surgeon, had maintained exacting standards that Karen had apparently internalized and now replicated with her own daughter. "Karen believes she is preparing Sabrina for success," Amanda explained. "She honestly cannot see the damage she is doing to their relationship and to Sabrina's sense of self." According to Amanda, the sisters had taken different paths in adulthood, with Amanda choosing a more balanced approach to achievement and happiness in her own life. This fundamental difference in values had created distance between them, though they maintained cordial contact for family occasions. "I have tried to provide Sabrina with a different perspective when I can," Amanda said. "But Karen limits their visits since she believes I undermine her parenting approach." Before ending the call, Amanda made a request that would prove pivotal in the unfolding situation. "If Sabrina comes to you in crisis, please know that I am available as a support person. She has my number and my home is always open to her. I just want her to know she has options." I thanked Amanda for her concern while maintaining appropriate professional boundaries, explaining that any significant changes to Sabrina's situation would need to involve proper channels and parental awareness. After the call, I updated Sabrina's file with notes about this additional family contact, sensing that Amanda might become an important figure in whatever resolution eventually emerged from this increasingly tense situation. 2 days later, Sabrina arrived at school with a demeanor I had not seen before. There was a tightly controlled energy about her, anger simmering just beneath a composed surface. She requested to see me during her study hall period. "Things got worse," she said without preamble when she entered my office. "Mom is now taking half of every paycheck I earn at the cafe." "Taking it how?" I asked, alarmed by this escalation. "She says since I proved I cannot be trusted with money by prioritizing art over academics, she needs to manage my earnings. She is putting half in the college fund and keeping the other half as payment for phone privileges and internet access." The control had extended from possessions to ongoing income, a concerning escalation that further undermined Sabrina's agency and the fundamental lesson that work should connect to earned rewards. "I talked to my Aunt Amanda," Sabrina continued, her voice strengthening. "She says what Mom is doing is not normal, that parents are supposed to guide you, not control every single thing in your life." This was the first time Sabrina had mentioned any perspective that countered her mother's narrative, a potentially important development in her understanding of the situation. "How did you feel hearing another adult's viewpoint?" I asked carefully. "Like maybe I am not crazy," Sabrina replied. "Like maybe I deserve to have some say in my own life." She detailed a major argument that had occurred the previous evening when Karen had demanded she sign a written agreement regarding the new financial arrangement. Sabrina had refused for the first time in their relationship, triggering an intense confrontation. She said I was becoming defiant, and that she would not tolerate disrespect in her house, that as long as I lived under her roof I would abide by her rules without question. The argument had escalated until Sabrina had done something unprecedented. She had called her Aunt Amanda for support during the conflict itself. Aunt Amanda asked to speak to Mom, and they argued for almost an hour. I could hear Mom saying I was manipulating the situation and trying to turn family against her. After the call, Karen had confiscated Sabrina's phone as punishment for triangulating family members and involving others in what she considered private household matters. "So I used my computer to email Aunt Amanda after Mom went to bed," Sabrina continued. "We talked about options." A knot formed in my stomach as I sensed where this conversation was heading. "What kind of options?" I asked. Sabrina met my eyes directly, a new resolve visible in her expression. I asked if I could come stay with her for a while, and she said yes. This development significantly changed the parameters of the situation. While Karen's controlling behaviors had been concerning, they had remained within the bounds of legal parental authority. A potential change in living arrangements introduced complex legal and ethical considerations that would require careful navigation. "Sabrina, that would be a major decision with legal implications," I explained gently. "Your mother has legal custody, and without her consent, staying elsewhere could create additional complications." "Aunt Amanda is researching options," Sabrina replied. "She says there are ways for teenagers to have more say in their living situations if there are valid concerns. She is going to talk to a family lawyer." I acknowledged her feelings while explaining the school's position and the reality of custody laws. While I could not encourage any action that might violate legal custody arrangements, I could ensure Sabrina understood appropriate channels and resources for family mediation. "Whatever happens, please keep me updated about your situation," I told her. "My priority is your well-being, and I want to make sure you have appropriate support through this process." As Sabrina left my office that day, I felt the weight of a situation rapidly approaching a breaking point. The introduction of Amanda as an alternative adult figure and the possibility of a custody challenge had raised the stakes significantly. Whatever resolution emerged would likely reshape Sabrina's relationship with her mother in lasting ways, for better or worse. I immediately consulted with our principal and school legal counsel to ensure we understood the school's obligations and limitations should the conflict escalate to a formal custody dispute. As tensions rose between mother and daughter, our responsibility was to maintain appropriate neutrality while prioritizing Sabrina's educational and emotional well-being throughout the process. The breaking point came faster than any of us anticipated. Just 1 week after our conversation about living arrangements, Sabrina did not show up for school on Monday morning. When the attendance office called Karen to confirm the absence, they were informed that Sabrina was taking personal time and would return the following week. Tuesday and Wednesday passed with no sign of Sabrina and minimal information from Karen beyond that Sabrina was safe and the situation was being handled privately. Professional concern led me to reach out directly to Karen, who responded with a terse email stating that family matters were not school business and that Sabrina would return when appropriate. On Thursday morning, my office phone rang just after the first bell. "Ms. Miller, this is Amanda Foster, Sabrina's aunt. I wanted to let you know directly that Sabrina is currently staying with me and will be returning to school tomorrow. I am bringing her in personally and would appreciate if we could meet briefly to discuss the transition." Amanda explained that following another intense conflict over Sabrina's remaining savings account, which Karen had attempted to transfer entirely to the college fund, Sabrina had packed a bag and called her aunt to pick her up. "Karen is understandably upset," Amanda said. "But after consulting with a family attorney, we are proceeding with a temporary guardianship arrangement with Karen's reluctant consent. The alternative would have been a more formal legal intervention that none of us wanted." The situation, while still deeply complicated, had found at least a temporary resolution that provided Sabrina with breathing space while legal details were addressed through appropriate channels. When Amanda and Sabrina arrived at school the next morning, the difference in Sabrina was immediately apparent. The constant tension that had tightened her shoulders and shadowed her eyes had visibly diminished, replaced by a cautious hope. "We have set up the guest room as her own space," Amanda explained during our brief meeting. "She has a desk for schoolwork, appropriate privacy, and I have already ordered her a basic iPad for her artwork, though it will take some time to rebuild her portfolio." While Amanda spoke, Sabrina sat quietly beside her, occasionally nodding or adding small details. There was a tentative quality to their interactions, the natural awkwardness of a new living arrangement still finding its rhythm. "What about Mom?" Sabrina asked suddenly. "Will she get in trouble?" The question revealed the complex loyalties that remained despite the conflict. Even in seeking protection from controlling behaviors, Sabrina still cared about her mother's well-being. "This is not about punishment," Amanda assured her. "It is about finding a healthier situation for everyone. Your mom has agreed to family counseling as part of our arrangement, which will hopefully help rebuild trust over time." As the school counselor, my role shifted to supporting Sabrina through this transition. We established regular check-in sessions to monitor her adjustment and academic progress. I coordinated with her teachers to ensure understanding of her situation without violating appropriate privacy, simply noting that Sabrina was experiencing a family transition that might temporarily affect her concentration. The legal arrangement that emerged was a 3-month temporary guardianship with Amanda, with regular visitation with Karen and weekly family therapy sessions. This cooling-off period provided space for both Karen and Sabrina to reflect on their relationship while maintaining familial connections under more structured circumstances. In the weeks that followed, Sabrina gradually regained her academic focus and creative enthusiasm. With Amanda's encouragement, she joined an after-school digital arts program that provided access to advanced software and mentorship from local graphic designers. She continued working part-time at the cafe now with full control of her earnings and a balanced approach to saving and spending that Amanda helped model. Karen's initial reaction had been predictably defensive and angry. She had framed Sabrina's departure as teenage rebellion and Amanda's intervention as enabling irresponsible behavior. But as the weekly therapy sessions progressed, glimpses of insight occasionally emerged. "Mom actually apologized yesterday," Sabrina shared during one of our sessions, the surprise evident in her voice. "Not for everything, but specifically for selling the iPad. The therapist asked her how she would feel if someone sold something she had worked hard to earn, and she said it made her think differently about it." Small moments of recognition did not constitute complete transformation, but they represented potential starting points for rebuilding a healthier relationship. The family therapist had explained to both sisters that patterns established over decades would require consistent effort and patience to modify. "Aunt Amanda says Mom is dealing with her own stuff from growing up," Sabrina reflected. "That does not make what she did okay, but it helps me understand a little better why she is so intense about achievement." This emerging capacity for perspective-taking, seeing her mother as a complex person shaped by her own experiences rather than simply an authority figure or antagonist, represented important emotional growth for Sabrina. It suggested the possibility of eventual reconciliation without returning to unhealthy patterns of control and compliance. As I observed this family system begin its slow evolution toward healthier functioning, I reflected on the delicate balance between supporting a student through crisis and maintaining appropriate professional boundaries. The system had ultimately worked as intended, with family resources activating to provide Sabrina with alternative support when her home situation became untenable. My role now was to continue providing school-based support while acknowledging that the primary healing work would happen within the family system itself, guided by the appropriate professionals and the resilient determination of a young person finding her voice. 3 months after Sabrina moved in with her Aunt Amanda, the temporary guardianship arrangement came up for its first formal review. By this point, significant changes had occurred for everyone involved. Sabrina had settled into life at Amanda's downtown apartment, where the environment was structured but flexible. Amanda maintained reasonable expectations about academics and behavior, while providing space for Sabrina to develop her own interests and self-regulation skills. "We have house agreements instead of rules," Sabrina explained during one of our sessions. "Aunt Amanda and I wrote them together. Things like communicate openly about plans, respect shared spaces, prioritize schoolwork, but make time for creativity too." With the pressure of perfection reduced, Sabrina's academic performance had actually improved. Her test anxiety diminished, allowing her natural intelligence and work ethic to shine without the paralysis of fear. Her math grade had risen from a B+ to a solid A through genuine engagement rather than desperate compliance. True to her word, Amanda had helped Sabrina purchase a new iPad 1 with even better specifications for digital art. While the lost portfolio remained a painful lesson, Sabrina had begun rebuilding her collection, discovering that her skills had continued to develop despite the interruption. Sometimes I actually think losing all my old work pushed me to try new techniques, she reflected. I was so afraid of messing up my good pieces before that I stopped experimenting. Now I am less precious about everything being perfect. The weekly therapy sessions had gradually shifted from crisis management to deeper exploration of family patterns. Karen had initially participated reluctantly, viewing the process as a formality to regain custody. But the skilled family therapist had created space for all three family members to express their perspectives without judgment. Mom talked about Grandpa last session, Sabrina shared, referring to Karen's father. How he would tear up her report card if she got any B's, even if everything else was an A. How she was never allowed to go to sleepovers or school dances because they were distractions from achievement. These glimpses into Karen's own childhood experiences provided context for her parenting approach without excusing its harmful impacts. The therapist had helped Karen begin connecting her controlling behaviors to her own unresolved experiences of being controlled, a crucial first step toward changing deeply ingrained patterns. Amanda's role had evolved from emergency rescuer to steady mentor, balancing supportive guidance with appropriate expectations. She consulted with me regularly about school resources and adolescent development, committed to providing Sabrina with structure without replicating the suffocating control she had experienced with Karen. I want to be clear that I am not trying to replace my sister in Sabrina's life, Amanda explained during one of our conferences. The goal has always been to help them build a healthier relationship, not to separate them permanently. Karen's journey proved more complicated, as is often the case when adults must confront long-established behaviors and beliefs. Initial defensive anger had given way to reluctant participation, then to moments of genuine reflection, interrupted by relapses into controlling impulses. During a supervised weekend visit, Karen had attempted to implement a strict minute-by-minute schedule that left no room for Sabrina's input or autonomy. The resulting conflict had necessitated an additional therapy session to reset boundaries and expectations. She is trying, Sabrina acknowledged with the wisdom beyond her years. Sometimes she catches herself starting to micromanage and actually stops. That never happened before. Small victories accumulated alongside continuing challenges. Karen had returned the remaining money from selling Sabrina's original iPad, acknowledging that regardless of her intentions, taking property, Sabrina had purchased herself had crossed an important boundary. Yet she continued to struggle with Sabrina's interest in art as a potential career path, insisting on researching the employment statistics for art school graduates during one particularly tense family session. When the formal review arrived, the family therapist recommended continuing the current arrangement for another 3 months, with increased visitation rights for Karen based on her progress in therapy. The gradual reunification plan included overnight visits and eventually weekends, with clear agreements about respecting Sabrina's property and providing appropriate autonomy. I am not ready to move back yet, Sabrina confided during our session following the review. But I do not hate the idea of trying again someday if things keep changing. I miss my room sometimes and our dog. The mention of missing aspects of her former home represented important integration, the ability to acknowledge both the harmful dynamics she had needed to escape and the genuine connections that remained. This balanced perspective suggested healthy processing, rather than either idealization or demonization of her mother and their relationship. Throughout this period, I maintained regular check-ins with Sabrina, focusing on her academic progress, social development, and emotional well-being. As the acute crisis stabilized, our sessions increasingly addressed normal adolescent concerns, navigating friendships, developing study skills for upcoming high school preparation, and exploring potential career interests. I am thinking about digital design for gaming companies, Sabrina shared excitedly during one session. Aunt Amanda took me to a Women in Tech conference, and I met this amazing artist who designs character concepts for major game studios. The spark that had been dimmed under excessive control was rekindling, fueled by appropriate encouragement and exposure to real-world applications of her interests. Sabrina had begun researching high schools with strong digital arts programs alongside traditional academic preparation, finding paths that integrated her multiple strengths rather than forcing an artificial choice between them. As the school year progressed toward its final months, Sabrina's case exemplified both the damage that can result from excessive control and the remarkable resilience of young people when provided with appropriate support and respect. The outcome remained uncertain, with family healing work continuing beyond our immediate view, but the trajectory had shifted toward health rather than escalating harm. What had begun as a crisis intervention had transformed into a measured reconstruction of family relationships, with Sabrina at the center, not as a passive recipient of adult decisions, but as an active participant in creating a healthier future for herself and her family. The painful lesson of the iPad had catalyzed a process that, while difficult, offered hope for genuine and lasting change. 1 year later, I sat across from Sabrina in my office for what would be one of our final counseling sessions before her transition to high school. At 14, the transformation from the anxious, controlled girl I had first met was remarkable. "I got accepted to the Visual Arts Magnet program," she announced, her face brightening with genuine pride. "They loved my digital portfolio, especially my character concept series." The program was highly selective, accepting only 20 students each year from across the district. Sabrina had worked diligently on her application portfolio, combining technical skill with the emotional depth that had emerged through her experiences over the past year. "That is wonderful news," I replied. "Your dedication really shows in your work." Sabrina's living situation had stabilized into an arrangement that few would have predicted at the height of the conflict. After 6 months with Amanda and consistent family therapy, she had begun a graduated return to living with Karen, starting with weekends and eventually expanding to a split custody arrangement. She now spent weekdays with Karen and weekends with Amanda, an unconventional solution that provided both stability and flexibility. "Mom has changed a lot," Sabrina reflected. "Not completely, you know. She still gets anxious about grades and college applications, but she is learning to catch herself. Last week I got a B on a science report, and she actually just asked if I understood why instead of freaking out." Karen's journey toward healthier parenting had not been linear, with progress interrupted by occasional returns to controlling behaviors when she felt anxious or uncertain. But the consistent therapy and the reality of potentially losing her relationship with her daughter had motivated genuine effort to change long-standing patterns. "The biggest difference is that she listens now," Sabrina continued. "Even when she disagrees with me, she at least lets me finish talking before she responds. And sometimes she actually changes her mind based on what I say." This fundamental shift from authoritarian control to authoritative guidance represented significant growth in their relationship. Karen had begun to recognize Sabrina as an emerging individual with valid perspectives, rather than simply an extension of herself or a project to perfect. The iPad incident, which had catalyzed the crisis, had become something of a reference point in their family healing work. The therapist had helped them use it as a concrete example to identify unhealthy patterns and practice alternative responses. "Mom and I have this thing now where if either of us feels like we are heading toward iPad territory, we can call a timeout," Sabrina explained. "It is kind of our code word for when things are getting too intense and we need to step back." Karen had not only returned the money from selling the original iPad, but had eventually contributed toward the purchase of a professional-grade tablet when Sabrina was accepted to a summer digital arts program. The gesture represented more than material restitution. It acknowledged the legitimacy of Sabrina's passion and talent. Amanda remained an important presence in Sabrina's life, providing both a healthy alternative adult perspective and practical support for her artistic development. The sisters had begun rebuilding their own relationship, finding common ground in their shared care for Sabrina, while acknowledging their different approaches to parenting and achievement. "They actually went to lunch together last week without me," Sabrina shared with slight amazement. "Aunt Amanda said they mostly talked about their own childhood and some stuff they never really discussed before about their parents." The intergenerational patterns were gradually being examined and reworked, with potential benefits extending beyond Sabrina's immediate situation to the broader family system. Karen had even begun her own individual therapy to address perfectionism and control issues rooted in her childhood experiences. Academically, Sabrina had flourished under the more balanced approach to achievement. Her grades remained excellent, but were now driven by genuine engagement rather than fear of consequences. She had developed effective self-regulation strategies, managing her time and priorities with decreasing need for external structure. "I am actually excited about high school," she said. "A little nervous too, but mostly looking forward to the new challenges and opportunities." Her digital art had progressed from hobby to potential career path with a growing portfolio and developing professional network through Amanda's connections in the tech industry. She had completed several paid commissions for local businesses, building both skills and confidence in her abilities. As our final counseling session drew to a close, I asked Sabrina what she had learned from the challenging experiences of the past year. "I learned that standing up for yourself is scary but necessary," she replied thoughtfully, "and that most people, even adults, are doing the best they can with what they know, even when that hurts others." She paused, considering her next words carefully. "I also learned that trust is fragile. Once it is broken, it takes a long time to rebuild, and it is never quite the same. Mom and I are in a better place now, but I am more careful about what I share and how vulnerable I am with her. I think that is okay, though. Part of growing up is learning who you can trust with different parts of yourself." The wisdom in her reflection struck me profoundly. Many adults never reach this level of nuanced understanding about relationships and trust. Through painful experience, Sabrina had developed emotional intelligence that would serve her throughout her life. "What would you want other parents to understand from your experience?" I asked. "That their kids are real people, not extensions of themselves or projects to perfect," she answered without hesitation. "And that control might work in the short term, but it destroys trust and connection in the long run. The more my mom tried to control everything, the more I wanted to escape as soon as I could." She smiled slightly before adding, "Also that kids remember how you make them feel more than what you make them do. I will always remember how it felt when Mom sold my iPad, the feeling that nothing was really mine and my work did not matter. That stays with you." As Sabrina prepared to leave my office and move forward into the next chapter of her education, I reflected on the profound journey I had witnessed. What had begun as a crisis over a single act of parental overreach had catalyzed a complex process of family transformation, ultimately leading to healthier relationships and personal growth for everyone involved. The path had not been easy or straightforward. There had been setbacks, tears, and moments when reconciliation seemed impossible. But through consistent effort, professional support, and the remarkable resilience of a young person determined to be both respected and connected to her family, a new equilibrium had gradually emerged. Not perfect, not without ongoing challenges, but fundamentally healthier than what had come before. The trust that had been shattered would never be quite the same, but something new and potentially stronger was being built in its place based on mutual respect rather than power and control. As I watched Sabrina walk confidently down the hallway toward her future, I thought about how often parents do not see what they have lost until it is too late. Karen had come dangerously close to permanently damaging her relationship with her daughter over an iPad and the control it represented. The wake-up call had been painful, but necessary, a harsh lesson in the difference between guiding a child and controlling them. What do you think about parents who control their children's possessions, even things they buy with their own money? Have you experienced or witnessed similar situations? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share to help others understand the importance of respecting children's autonomy while guiding their growth. Thank you for listening to this journey of broken trust and healing, and remember that how we treat the young people in our lives shapes not just their present, but their future relationships with themselves and others.